Good evening, folks, and welcome back to day number 59 of the Bible in 365. Today we are taking a look at Deuteronomy chapter 13, beginning in verse 1, and are exploring all the way to Deuteronomy chapter 16, ending in verse 8. We've got a little bit to talk about today, folks, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Picking up in Deuteronomy chapter 13, at the beginning of the chapter, we begin with a hypothetical. This hypothetical situation is regarding a prophet. If a prophet essentially approaches the Israelites, prophesies something, and it comes true, and then this prophet all of a sudden is saying, hey, let's go worship false gods, the Lord says this is a test that he is testing the Israelites, and the Israelites are not supposed to stray. They're not supposed to go and worship false gods just because someone prophesied and it came true. This would be a false prophet. In fact, what they're supposed to do is take that false prophet and kill him. Why? Because he was trying to lead the Israelites astray. Another hypothetical comes up. If your own brother, your daughter, your sister, your wife, your closest friend, and relatives, similar situation. If they try to lead you to worship false gods, what do? You cut them off, and you cut off that relationship at all costs, even to the point of death. Yes, if your friend, if your wife, if your brother, if your daughter tries to point you to a false god, then you kill them. That's it. At all costs, because God is a jealous God and he demands all of our worship, and idolatry and false worship is that serious to him. Now, within this chapter, it also talks about if someone leads an entire town astray, right? Then that entire town has to be killed and burnt down as a burnt offering to the Lord, because he takes, once again, false worship that seriously. He wants our undivided attention. He wants all of us, our entire heart. We worship him and him alone. We don't worship multiple gods. So, this chapter does have some application to us today. Now, I'm not saying go out and kill anyone. Please don't. By any means, do not do that. But you might have to evaluate some relationships you have. And if people are pointing you to false gods and to idols, into the things of this world, then you might need to cut that relationship off. And that could be a hard thing to do, to say goodbye to friends, that are not pointing you towards Jesus. All right, folks, moving forward to Deuteronomy chapter 14. Within this chapter, it talks about clean and unclean food. We've seen this before. Essentially, it's a list of what the Israelites are permitted to eat in terms of meat, and what they're not allowed to eat in terms of those living creatures. So there's different types of birds, different types of animals that they can eat and that they can't eat. Within this chapter, it also talks about tithes and offerings unto the Lord. It talks about tithing from your fields for those who have been really blessed and live far away. Essentially, they're supposed to sell their tithe in turn for silver, and then once they make the journey to the town where they're supposed to eat of this tithe offering to the Lord, they purchase a specific animal for that. That way they don't have to haul everything with them. Within this chapter, it also tells the Israelites to remember the Levites, because the Levites don't have an allotment. They don't have a specific inheritance. And so they need to be provided for as well. Moving on to Deuteronomy chapter 15. Deuteronomy chapter 15 talks about the year of Jubilee. Every 7 years, debt is erased. Essentially, there's not supposed to be poor people in Israel, because it's a land of inheritance. It's a land of blessing. And so essentially, it's making sure that people aren't getting wealthy at the sake of someone else. And also that people aren't getting taken advantage of just for borrowing money either. So it's to benefit everyone. Also, at this point in time, every 7 years you free servants. And then as well, within this, you set apart firstborn animals. Is to celebrate and to consume. And so these are the firstborn of several different types of animals from the herds and the flocks that are supposed to be used to help celebrate and be used as a sacrifice. Now, lastly, moving on to chapter 16. At the beginning, in the first few verses of this chapter, it's discussing the Passover, which it tells them to observe the month of Aviv and to celebrate the Passover of the Lord, their God, who brought them out of Egypt by night. Now, within this celebration, it tells them to eat for 7 days unleavened bread, and then also to have specific processes and rules with regards to the meat that they sacrifice, and then where their sacrifice has to take place for the Passover. All right, folks, so I hope that you will join me tomorrow as we take a look at Deuteronomy chapter 16, beginning in verse 9, and explore all the way to Deuteronomy chapter 19, ending in verse 21. As always, folks, God bless.